gut flora of that termite. Termites eat probably the worst food in all of the world, right? Because they're just eating dead wood. That's what they do. And all dead wood is a sugar. And it's a sugar that, by themselves, they can't actually metabolize. And so what they have is an internal gut flora that consists of like bacteria and fungi and things like that. Those bacteria and fungi are able to take that sugar, break it down, and actually make cool nutrients from it. And then the termites are able to use the nutrients that those bacteria and fungi are generating. The question is, what do the fungi get from it, right? And the fungi get a really cool, safe place to live in all of the sugar that their hearts desire. Okay, let's shift gears just a little bit and talk about science in general. So science really isn't a class, right? It's really a process. And what we're hoping that you come away with, one of the things that we're hoping you come away with from taking a general biology class is an ability to really critically think about and analyze phenomena. To help us do that, we have this thing called the scientific method. And it's a way to approach a question. Now, in science, depending on the discipline, there are a couple of different ways to ask and answer questions. The first of which is called deductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning takes well-known and established scientific laws and explains phenomenon with those laws. So for example, there's the law of gravity, right? That's what's holding us all to the ground. If you and I were out sitting under that sugar pine tree behind us and a pine cone fell on us, you would be able to look at that phenomenon, take that observation and think, well, what happened was the pine cone detached from the branch and gravity pulled that down on top of me, right? That's deductive reasoning. It's taking well-established laws and explaining phenomenon from it. That's largely what chemists and physicists do. Alternatively, and this is generally what biologists do, we employ something called inductive reasoning. And in inductive reasoning, we recognize some phenomenon, we create some sort of hypothesis from it, and then we test those hypotheses. And then hopefully from those hypotheses, we're able to describe a law, or at least a theory. So when Newton was describing the law of gravity, he used inductive reasoning, right? And if it's true that an apple really did fall on his head, he was sitting under an apple tree, right? This apple fell on him, and he thought, well, why did that happen? Maybe there is some force that's attracting that apple to the ground. And then using some experimentation and some mathematical modeling, he was able to describe the law of gravity. So with y'all's lab report, you all are going to be using inductive reasoning. And really, the process of creating hypotheses ought to be done before we actually collect the data. And we'll see if we're able to do that. Okay, so what is the scientific method? And we're going to use a pitiful example for the scientific method, so please bear with me. The scientific method starts with an observation. So let's say, for the sake of example, that we have two flashlights, and those two flashlights aren't working, and they're not working for the same reason. Our observation is our flashlights aren't working. So what we need to do next is generate some hypotheses. So, in y'all's vast experience with flashlights, why might they not be working? Batteries, okay, I like it. So, hypothesis number one says that the batteries aren't working. there a second reason that they might not be working?
They got wet.
Okay, it got wet, and maybe you shorted out the circuitry. Yeah. Can I spell that? Is that right?
Yeah.
I'm just going to do that. Any other explanations?
Maybe an actual bulb in the flashlight.
Okay, maybe the bulb burnt out. Can we just say that? Is that okay? Okay, so maybe bad bulb. Okay, so we have these three working hypotheses for why our flashlights might not be working. Now it's important that we have two flashlights, and neither of them are working for the same reason. Now, one of the prerequisites for generating a hypothesis is that it must be falsifiable. There must be a possibility that it's wrong. Okay? And our hypotheses have to be testable. Does anybody read the author, Terry Pratchett? Nobody? Y'all need to do yourself a favor and read some books by Terry Pratchett. So he's this, well, he's dead now, but he was this British author who wrote really, really funny stories, and he created this whole world called the Discworld. And it was this world that rested on the back of elephants that were standing on a cosmic turtle that sounds super cool, I know. Anyways, he created this mythos, right, around this Discworld thing. So we could say, right, well, our flashlights aren't working because one of the elephants fell off the back of the turtle and it's causing some disruption, right? That's a hypothesis, but it's inherently not testable and not falsifiable. I mean, how do you test, first of all, whether or not this cosmic turtle actually exists and whether an elephant actually fell off? Okay, so all of our hypotheses have to be testable. We have to be able to collect some data about them, and they have to at least potentially be falsifiable. Okay, which these fit the bill, right? I mean, it could be that that's wrong, that the batteries aren't bad at all, or that the circuits haven't been shorted out. So far, we're good. Now, the next thing that we have to do is create some predictions about what's going to happen if we change batteries, or we change out circuitry, or we change light bulbs, right? And in this case, the prediction is going to be the same for all three. The prediction is the batteries are bad, we change them out, then the flashlight will work. Or change the light bulb, the flashlight should work. Okay, so after we generate our predictions, then we actually test our hypotheses. So let's do this, right? We have our two flashlights, and we're going to test hypothesis number one first. We're going to change out the batteries. Do we change out the batteries from both flashlights or from one flashlight? Why would we only do one? What's that?
You have to have a control group.
Okay, you have to have a control group. And why do you need a control group? I mean, couldn't you just change the batteries in both, turn them both on, and have them work and say, yep, it was the batteries? What's wrong with that?
There's no problem solving.
Okay, at least you don't necessarily know that what you did fixed the problem, right? It could just be that the first time you tried to turn it on, for whatever reason, it didn't work, right? And the batteries really weren't bad. But if you have both of those flashlights and you change the batteries out of one and not the other and it works, then you know, right, that it was indeed the batteries that were the problem. That's the reason that you have a control, so that you know that your experimental procedures are actually what caused the change. Okay, and what we're doing is we're controlling for a single variable. We have three potential explanations here. Do we want to do all three of them at the same time? Should we change out the batteries and the circuits and the light bulb at the same time? Why not?
Because you don't know which one is what, like which one caused it to be bad.
Exactly right. So if you do all that stuff and the flashlight works, how do you know which one of the ones that you changed are actually the solution, right? Mm-hmm. So you control for a single variable. So the first time we do it, we change out the batteries, turn them both on, and it doesn't work. What can we conclude from that experiment? It's not the batteries, right? We change out the circuits, same thing. They don't work. We change out the light bulb in one, and it works, and the explanation is flashlights had burnt out light bulbs, right? So that's the process of science. It's very methodical and very logical and very deliberate. Okay, so then we can generate some conclusion based on our tests. Now, generally speaking, particularly these days, experimentation can be incredibly convoluted and not very straightforward. It takes a lot of work. And so it could be that we generate a whole bunch of hypotheses trying to explain what's going on, and none of those hypotheses explain the phenomenon. So then we have to go back and we have to think a little bit more about our observations and what other potential explanations there might be. So a good flow chart of how the scientific process actually works is this one, where we start up here with some observation and we generate a question from that observation, a whole bunch of hypotheses, and then we make some predictions, we do some testing, and we find out that some of those hypotheses aren't correct. These other three might still be correct, so we refine our test a little bit, and we are able to exclude a couple more hypotheses and then generate a final conclusion. So let's do another example of the scientific process. Let's talk about giraffes for just a few minutes. So giraffes live on the savannas of Africa, and they have really, really long necks. Why? What have you guys heard about long necks? Yeah, go ahead, Matt. Right, that's the dogma, that's the propaganda that all of us have been filled with since we were in elementary school. That those acacia trees that they're eating from are really tall, and those with the tallest necks are going to have the most access. Wonderful hypothesis. Why else might they be long-necked? Dominance, yeah. Dominance, particularly with respect to reproduction. Maybe lady giraffes like a really long neck, and the guys with the really long neck have the most access to females. So those can be our two working hypotheses. Those with longer necks mate more, and those with longer necks eat more. Okay. So if we were doing this experiment, what we would do is we'd go to Africa, right, which would be rad, right? Am I right? Africa's a cool place, yeah. So we could go to Africa and we could observe giraffes, and we could see if those with the longest necks are in fact eating more, or if those with the longest necks are reproducing more. So these are our two. I'm going to do this a lot. I'm going to forget where I left the remote, and then I'm going to run back and forth. So these are our two hypotheses. Hypothesis number one says long necks eat more. Hypothesis number two says lady giraffes like long necks better than short necks. Okay? So if we were to collect some data about eating, this is what our data would look like, which looks like a mess, right? What this shows you, though, is the average height of females and the average height of males, so males are a little bit taller than females are, and where they're spending most of their time feeding in the canopy. So females are like 4 meters tall, which is a meter is a little over 3 feet, so they're a little over 12 feet tall, right? Males are a little bit over 15 feet tall. Females spend the vast majority of their time grazing 2.5 meters, so like 8 feet up, way below their maximum reach, right? Males spend most of their time about 3 meters in the canopy, so about 10 feet up, well below the maximum reach of their necks as well. So what these data suggest is that they aren't necessarily feeding as high as they can. The vast majority of the food that they're eating, they're actually having to bend down to get. Now, I have a video, and I don't know that it's going to work, and you'll have to forgive the hyperbole in the video. Let's see if this works. Oh, that was exciting. Okay. Oh, let's pause.
Oh. Who's that? Someone's watching it. This kid in my class was like watching him like hit giraffes.
So this
Oh my
this
gosh,
is
I-
an Animal Planet video, and generally speaking, I'm not a fan of Animal Planet, but
Why?
because I feel like they're too sensational. You know what I mean?
What
Like
does that-
they go for like the super exciting type stuff. Okay.
Rare and chilling images of two giraffes battling it out in the wild. It is a shocking display of animal-on-animal brutality that leaves everyone on this African safari shaken. Kathy and Richard Auckland were celebrating their wedding anniversary with a high-end safari in Tanzania, Africa. The couple has been on more than 20 safaris over the years, but this one will be like no other. Within 20 minutes, the group comes across a small herd of Maasai giraffes.
You see giraffes all the time on safari. In fact, we probably weren't even going to bother videoing them at the start.
As the jeep rolls along, the group runs into more giraffes. But this time, the seasoned guy behind the wheel shuts off the engine. He knows giraffes standing hip to hip means they're sizing each other up for a fight. And just 30 seconds later...
You heard a big crunch. That was really horrific. We couldn't believe it. We were quite shocked.
Each wrecking ball slam delivers enough force to knock the 4,000-pound giraffe off its feet. The Aucklands are about 20 feet away, but their only concern is for the giraffes. In the wild, male giraffes are known to fight over a breeding female. The awkward posturing is called necking. Each one of these violent blows delivers enough force to move the minivan. The disturbing sounds make it seem as if every